It was 2007 when renowned documentary filmmaker Ethan Williams and his small crew arrived on the isolated Leskova Island, situated in the icy waters off the coast of Alaska. Their mission was to uncover the truth behind the legends of the Black Ghost, a massive killer orca, rumored to be responsible for several unexplained disappearances in the area over the past few decades. The island of Leskova had been home to a small fishing community until the 1970s, when the last residents abandoned it, fleeing in fear after a series of mysterious deaths. The island gained its ominous reputation from that tragic time, with stories of a jet-black orca stalking the icy waters and claiming human lives. As Ethan and his team made camp near the remains of the abandoned village, they felt a palpable sense of dread. Cameraman Jake Roberts shifted uneasily as he filmed the dilapidated buildings overtaken by nature. He muttered that the place gave him the creeps. Ethan simply nodded, his eyes alight with determination. That's why they were there, to shed light on the darkness surrounding this island's past. Over the next few days, they explored the crumbling remains, interviewing marine biologists who spun chilling tales of the legendary Black Ghost. The orca was massive, over 30 feet long and weighing 10 tons. Its black coloration and wicked scars made it unmistakable. More disturbingly, it seemed to hold an inexplicable vendetta against humans. The more Ethan learned, the more obsessed he became with capturing the whale on film. His fixation deeply unsettled Jake and the others, as he planned increasingly risky expeditions to locate the beast. Finally, they set out on a boat to circle the island for several days. Late on the third afternoon, they spotted an onyx dorsal fin cutting through the waves half a mile away. The Black Ghost itself had arrived. Heart-pounding, Jake stared through his viewfinder in awe as the full scope of the monster came into focus, a 40-foot leviathan undulating powerfully through the depths. As it surfaced, its terrible visage breached high above their boat, crude scars marring its obsidian bulk. The whale regarded them silently for a moment, its cold, fathomless eyes seeming to bore into their souls. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it slipped back beneath the inky waves and vanished. That night, shaken by the encounter, Jake begged Ethan to abandon his reckless pursuit of the orca. But the documentary maker's obsession had fully taken hold. Against their protests, he took their boat alone towards a cove where the Black Ghost was rumored to appear, determined to lure it in with a chum slick and capture an attack on camera. Above the cove's dark cliffs, a pale, full moon crested the horizon as Ethan waited alone on the glassy black waters, the chum spreading in thick crimson tendrils around his small boat. After nearly an hour, the first faint ripples disturbed the surface nearby. The Black Ghost had arrived, drawn by the scent. It approached the boat with a nightmarish slowness, its colossal form causing the water to gently rise and fall with each undulation of its powerful tail. Ethan stood transfixed, fumbling with his camera as the whale surfaced barely 20 feet away, its massive jaws unhinged silently, rows of serrated teeth as long as swords glistening in the moonlight. The eyes, cold and intelligent, locked onto Ethan as the beast seemed to regard him for an endless moment simply. Then, without warning, the Black Ghost arched its tremendous bulk and launched itself directly at the boat, its gaping maw eclipsing everything. The camera tumbled into the churning water as the orca's jaws snapped shut with a thunderous crash of splintering fiberglass. The chaos swallowed Ethan's horrified scream as he was flung overboard, disappearing beneath the surface in a froth of thrashing white water. On the cliffside, Jake watched in stunned disbelief as the whale suddenly breached completely, the tattered remains of the boat pinched between its teeth like a toothpick. It seemed to eye them briefly, chillingly, before silently slipping back into the depths. A faint water tread reached their ears as Ethan resurfaced 100 yards away, flailing and gasping for air while clutching the remnants of his shattered camera housing. The team quickly launched a small dinghy and pulled him aboard, shaking and bleeding from a ragged gash on his forehead but miraculously alive. As he clung to them, babbling feverishly, his eyes remained locked on where the whale had vanished. Hours later, after being tended to by the shaken medical officer, Ethan sat hollow-eyed and silent while watching the footage from his ruined camera. The final clip showed only a blur of shadows and rushing water before abruptly cutting to static. Beside him, Jake shook his head slowly in awe and horror. He couldn't believe they were still obsessing over this after that monster almost killed Ethan. Ethan said nothing for a long while, slowly rewinding the footage repeatedly. Finally, he spoke in a hushed tone that there was something unnatural about how it behaved, like it was calculating and intelligent. He turned his hollow gaze towards Jake. The whale was something more. They were the only ones who could expose the truth. In the following days, a deeply shaken crew prepared to depart the nightmarish island, while Ethan pored over lore and records, his obsession renewed with more profound existential conviction. What he found in the historical accounts of the island's indigenous inhabitants raised more questions than answers. The Black Ghost, it seemed, had been revered and feared as a vengeful spirit guardian for centuries before European explorers and whalers arrived. The massive killer whale was depicted in ancient carvings and myths as an eternal, wrathful force defending the island's shores from human encroachment, striking down any who trespassed in its domain. Legends told of long-dead shamans and chieftains forging an unholy pact with the whale, imbuing it with unnatural power and formidable intelligence. In return, the Black Spirit would safeguard their island and visit untold misery upon any who defiled it, claiming their lives for the depths. As it seemed, Ethan became convinced there was a kernel of truth after witnessing the Black Ghost's incredible size and inexplicable malice towards him. Something ancient and supernatural dwelled within the coal-black Orca, a rage passed down countless generations. With fervent obsession, he resolved to remain on Leskova and continue pursuing the whale, even after his crew abandoned him for their safety. Week after week, he took to the straits in a tiny rented skiff, enduring fierce storms and privation as he relentlessly scoured the waters. At last, one dim, foggy dawn, he spotted the familiar black shape cutting through the steel-gray swells a half-mile away. Gripping his cameras, Ethan felt a strange sense of certainty, like the conclusion to a mythic epic was finally at hand. Once more, the Black Ghost approached his craft with appalling slowness, revealing its titanic mass as it surfaced not 20 yards away. Its cruel obsidian gaze locked with Ethan's, the weight of eons seeming to pass between them in that moment. As the whale turned its great flank towards his boat, Ethan lifted the lens of his makeshift camera rig closer, his eyes burning with manic desperation behind the viewfinder. With a thunderous explosion of water, the Black Ghost arched its back and raised its gargantuan tail fluke high above the skiff. Ethan stared into the fathomless void of the whale's massive lid-like eye as the colossal mass descended for an endless frozen second. But death did not find Ethan Williams in that infinite roaring void. Just when the obsidian enormity of the Black Ghost's tail seemed primed to extinguish him, a merciful undertow whipped him sideways, and he was expelled from the vortex in a riot of churning froth. He emerged gasping and spluttering, pulled from the brink by sheer chance, or perhaps the whale's inscrutable intentions. His tiny skiff was nowhere to be seen, smashed into oblivion, but Ethan clung desperately to the soggy remnants of his camera housing as his only lifeline. 3 weeks later, a research vessel crew scanning the area for marine life discovered Ethan in a delirious state, drifting in and out of consciousness while lashing at the remnants of his apparatus. When he was finally revived and able to recount his incredible tale, few believed the documentary filmmaker's claims of encountering a supernatural entity that transcended the natural order. Ethan's camera, severely damaged from the incident, contained only brief flashes of distorted footage that could not be enhanced or clarified. Whether it depicted the cosmic players and eldritch vistas that Ethan insisted he witnessed in the Black Ghost's final gesture remained ambiguous. The encounter birthed an obsession more profound than before. Ethan became convinced that the Black Ghost was an avatar of older and more inexplicable forces, entities or presences scattered across the thresholds of our reality, hinted at in primordial myths and outdated cosmologies. Beneath a dark, velvety sky sprinkled with stars, a group of eager tourists gathered at the dock, ready to embark on the Sea Whisperer. Nestled in the tranquil waters of the San Juan Islands, the night was shaping up to be perfect for a whale-watching cruise. With a gentle breeze tempering the crisp air, the conditions were ideal. The tourists, buzzing with anticipation, were there hoping to glimpse the majestic and elusive orcas known to frequent these waters. Their excitement was palpable, each person clad in anticipation of meeting these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. James Bennett, an experienced sailor who has spent years in this area, gave a safety briefing and explained what to expect on the cruise. Emily Jackson, an eager young biologist who wanted to see orcas in the wild, and Tom Sanders, a photographer looking to get the perfect shot, were among the tourists. The Sea Whisperer silently glided over the calm ocean as the clock struck midnight. Warm jackets wrapped around the tourists. They anxiously scanned the dark waters. The air was crisp, and all that could be heard were distant marine life and the lapping water on the hull. A ripple appeared in the water. The dorsal slicing gracefully and strength through the water surface was a fin. The Midnight Hunter was a solitary large orca well known by locals because of its mysterious and striking nature. Tom's camera snapped rapidly as Emily's eyes widened in amazement. The orca was swimming alongside the boat, its sleek black body shining in the moonlight. Everything seemed magical for a brief moment. The atmosphere changed suddenly and without warning. The Midnight Hunter dived under the boat and a powerful jolt shook the Sea Whisperer. The tourists were frightened by a loud scraping noise. They grabbed onto anything they could. Everyone was urged to remain calm as Captain Bennett's voice cut through the noise, instructing them to move towards the life jackets. The orca had collided with the boat, resulting in a visible crack in the hull through which water began to seep into the ship. As water pooled at their feet, panic set in. When the boat tilted dangerously, Emily, Tom, and the other tourists raced towards the life jackets to help each other. The passengers' faces were cast in eerie shadows as the lights flickered. Captain Bennett and his team quickly deployed life rafts as the situation escalated. Speaking calmly and urgently, he emphasized the need to evacuate everyone before it was too late. Meanwhile, Emily, confused, noticed the Midnight Hunter circling back, its fins slicing through the water. She exclaimed that it had returned, pointing towards the shadow in the water. Caught between his desire to document the incredible event and his fear, Tom grabbed his digital camera. He voiced his confusion about why the orca was chasing them, his question barely audible above the sounds of rushing water and creaking metal. Emily assisted an elderly couple to enter the first life raft as it was lowered into the water. Quickly ushering everyone, Captain Bennett directed more people onto the rafts, shouting for them to head his way. Meanwhile, the crew diligently counted heads to ensure no one was forgotten in the hurried evacuation. Midnight Hunter passed again, its massive body visible in the moonlight. Orcas are known to be a fearsome predator. Captain Bennett took one last look around as the passengers climbed into the rafts, his expression a blend of concern and composure. He indicated the urgency of moving away from the unsafe vessel. As they slowly left the Sea Whisperer sinking, the small convoy of rafts felt their hearts race. The orca's breath echoed in the darkness, reminding them of their narrow escape. The night was not over yet, and they were safe. The San Juan Islands, looming as the life rafts floated gently in the dark waters, offered a faint promise that safety was near. With his eyes on the horizon, Captain Bennett steered the leading raft. The cold wind and the adrenaline from the ordeal kept the survivors alert. Emily wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her mind racing with questions about the aggressive behavior of the orca known as Midnight Hunter. She expressed her thoughts quietly, noting that orcas don't often attack boats. Sitting next to her, Tom listened intently, his camera now tucked away in a drawer, rendered useless without any light. Tom nodded with a somber expression. There's got to be a good reason. He speculated about trying to make sense of it. The other tourists were both shocked and relieved. Among them was Sarah Lee, a retired teacher who had long dreamed of seeing an orca in person. She expressed her disbelief to the person beside her, reflecting on the unexpected nature of the encounter. They were enveloped in darkness, with only the flickering emergency lights on their vests and the light from the moon. The sea sounds seemed to be amplified, with each wave crashing into the rafts increasing their anxiety. A loud splash suddenly echoed throughout the night, and several passengers gasped. The Midnight Hunter briefly surfaced, its massive body visible in the moonlight. It then disappeared. Orcas were still nearby, reminding them that their situation was precarious. Captain Bennett remained calm and spoke reassuringly to the passengers, assuring them of their proximity to shore and imminent safety. Despite his calming words, his eyes constantly scanned the water around them, alert to any further dangers. As they neared the islands, a faint siren sound grew louder. Rescue was on the way. The group felt a sense of relief, and the conversation shifted from stories of fear to survival. The group spoke about the crew's swift actions, the captain's steady guidance, and their reactions to the crisis. The Coast Guard arrived and searched the darkness of the sea with powerful beams. The Coast Guard safely transferred the terrified passengers from the rafts into their vessel. As each person boarded, the relief was palpable. They were given warm blankets and hot beverages. Once everyone was safe and accounted for, Captain Bennett briefed the Coast Guard about the incident. He mentioned the necessity of informing the authorities, suggesting that the aggressive behavior might be due to a problem with the Orca, or could simply be a fluke. He emphasized the importance of understanding exactly what had happened. The survivors gathered together on the shore as the sunrise painted the sky with oranges and pinks. They were all wrapped in blankets. They were bonded in unexpected ways by the ordeal. Emily and Tom exchanged contact information and promised to share photos and messages. Sarah Lee smiled faintly despite her night of terror. As the news about the Midnight Hunter spread, it sparked debates in the local and national media. These debates focused on wildlife interaction and the safety associated with such tours. As investigations were underway, night cruises were temporarily suspended. Emily, Tom, and the other survivors carried the vivid memory of that fateful night. The sight of the Orca's dorsal fins slicing through the moonlit waters haunted their dreams for many years. Midnight Hunter, the lone Orca navigating the depths of the San Juan Islands, continued to swim, driven by mysterious impulses that remained unfathomable to those who had witnessed its unsettling behavior. In 2011, the Richards family, comprised of husband Eric Richard, wife Samantha, and their two children Lily and Thomas, decided to embark on a sailing vacation off the picturesque coast of New Zealand's South Island. After extensive planning and preparation, they chartered a 42-foot sailboat named the Avalon from a reputable local company in the coastal town of Kaikoura. Kaikoura boasted incredible marine life and a pristine natural environment. The nutrient-rich waters surrounding the town attracted many species, including whales, dolphins, seals, and occasionally orcas or killer whales. For the Richards family, who were passionate sailors and marine enthusiasts, the opportunity to observe these magnificent creatures up close was irresistible. As the Avalon sailed smoothly through the gentle swells under clear blue skies, the sense of liberation from their daily routines enveloped them. Eric skillfully maneuvered the sails and rigging, while Samantha prepared a light picnic lunch in the cabin below deck. Their adventurous 12-year-old daughter Lily eagerly scanned the horizon with her binoculars, while young Thomas played contentedly with his action figures in the cockpit. It appeared to be another perfect day in paradise, with only the calls of seabirds and the rhythmic sound of waves against the hull as background noise. However, the first hint that something was wrong soon emerged. Lily's voice echoed from the bow, drawing Eric's attention to see something. His eyes widened excitedly when he spotted the dark shapes breaking the water's surface. He signaled his wife to get the camera, believing they had gotten orcas approaching. The entire family gathered at the railings in moments, marveling as a large pod of orcas emerged from the depths, their distinctive black and white markings shimmering in the sunlight. The creatures began to playfully interact with the boat, rolling and leaping partially out of the water in a breathtaking display. Looking at the size of an orca male, Eric pointed to an exceptionally massive orca as it gracefully breached the waves. It was an incredible sight. Laughing joyfully, Samantha attempted to capture the moment with a flurry of camera snaps, while Thomas bounced excitedly. Even Lily, typically reserved, was captivated by the spectacle. But as quickly it appeared, Eric began to sense something was amiss. One of the more giant orcas, a massive bull, had broken away from the pod's playful antics and was now circling the Avalon in a slow, ominous orbit. Samantha observed hesitantly, voicing her husband's concerns that the orca seemed agitated. Before Eric could respond, the bull orca charged at the boat head-on, colliding with the bow with a powerful impact that sent the Avalon lurching to one side. Lily was thrown off her feet, but Eric managed to grab her by her life vest before she could fall overboard. as the other orcas swiftly departed, leaving the belligerent male behind. The family found themselves alone in the open ocean. Night fell rapidly, a sense of dread settling over them. The bull orca relentlessly attacked the Avalon for 2 hours, ramming it repeatedly while Eric struggled to maintain control and prevent it from capsizing. The impacts caused significant damage to the hull, causing the boat to take on water with each passing minute. Just as the family contemplated abandoning the ship, a horrifying sound pierced the darkness, the loud bang of the orca breaching fully from the water. With a thunderous crash, the massive creature slammed onto the Avalon, shattering the deck and snapping the mast before disappearing beneath the waves. The boat began to sink rapidly, and Eric managed to send a distress call before the radio malfunctioned. Within minutes, the sailboat capsized utterly. The Richards family clung to the overturned hull as the orca circled nearby, trapping them in the frigid water. Eric urged them not to panic or make sudden movements as they struggled to stay afloat. Over the following hours, the nightmare continued. Too exhausted to swim to the life rafts, they remained on the hull, taking turns resting and trying to conserve their energy. At one point, the bull orca approached them, breaking a section of the hull and causing deadly shards of fiberglass to scatter in the water. Eric felt a sharp pain in his ribs as a shard sliced into him, but he remained silent, not wanting to attract the orca's attention. Only once did the orca breach near them, drenching them with cold water before disappearing again into the depths. As the hours passed, their strength waned, and they clung to hope of rescue. When dawn finally arrived, they spotted a ship approaching, a whale-watching charter vessel returning to port. Eric shouted weakly for help as the vessel's searchlight scanned the area. But the orca, realizing its time was running out, made one final desperate attempt to attack them. With a massive breach, it aimed for the family, and in a split-second decision, Eric pushed his wife and children away as the orca destroyed what remained of their refuge. When rescue teams finally arrived, they found Samantha, Lily, and Thomas clinging together with Eric, trying to float from a distance, traumatized but alive. Eric's sacrifice and injuries were evident as he was pulled from the water. In the aftermath, the Richards family's ordeal made international headlines, sparking debates about orcas' behavior. The experience shattered their romanticized view of the ocean, replacing wonder with terror. The family members struggled to come to terms with their harrowing ordeal, haunted by the memory of that nightmare off the coast of New Zealand. A tribe lived off the coasts of North Island in New Zealand. The waters raged against the cliffs and the beaches, but their lives were closely linked to the sea. The tribe revered a mighty orca called Kaitiaki. It was seen as a spirit of protection and strength. They believed the sea was generous and would reign in peace as long as Kaitiaki lived there. The tranquility of the area was disturbed one fateful morning when, unbeknownst to Kaitiaki, a group unaware of his presence accidentally caught and killed a young calf orca. The calf in question was not any ordinary orca, but Kaitiaki's offspring, whom the ancient protector had been teaching roots and rituals to their kind. The fishermen did not notice the calf's death and thought nothing of it. But Kaitiaki was deeply affected by this incident. After losing its calf, Kaitiaki's protective nature changed into rage and revenge. Swimmers near the shore began reporting unsettling encounters. Boats were damaged mysteriously, and their hulls were struck violently from below. This sent shivers down the spines of those who experienced the orca's anger. The tribe became increasingly afraid of the water, their lifeblood. The elders gathered and whispered about a curse they had received for the death of Kaitiaki's calf. They turned to Tama, their young shaman who was known for his wisdom and connection with the spirit world. Tama was aware of the daunting task he had before him. He needed to bridge the divide between the grieving sea guardian and the fear-filled villages. To do so, he set out on a quest to learn the language spoken by orcas, consulting ancient texts and meditating near the shoreline, where he heard Kaitiaki's mournful cries in the crashing waves. Realizing the severity of the situation, Tama performed a ceremony to appeal to Kaitiaki. He made an offering out of woven reeds, shells, and other symbols of his tribe's life and connection, and set it free in the water where the calf died. The gesture was intended to show remorse and ask for forgiveness. Tribal members on the shore were watching. The sea seemed to churn with anticipation as Kaitiaki approached the massive offering. Orcas circled the floating tribute, their movement suggesting an understanding of its profound significance. At that moment, the ocean appeared to hold its breath, and Tama, witnessing this solemn ritual, was filled with a complex blend of fear and hope, sensing the gravity of the ceremony unfolding before him. As night fell, Tama waited by the water, his eyes fixed on where the stars and the sea met, hoping for a sign. The tribe also waited, occasionally catching a glimpse of Tama's silhouette on the moonlit shore, and wondering if the young shaman could turn their fortune around. Over the day, the calmness of the ocean grew. The water around the memorial became almost eerily calm as the violent swells diminished. Kaitiaki's massive body glided close to shore, causing the water's surface to ripple violently. Tama stood unwaveringly on the shoreline and watched the orca circle the area where the offering floated. The tribe held their breath and waited for the orca's next move. Kaitiaki gently nudged the woven gift with its snout, pushing it toward the beach. The orca made a mournful, long sound as the bundle washed into Tama's foot. Tama considered this an acknowledgement of their apology and a sign that they would communicate and reconcile. Tama, energized by the response, took a further step into the surf. He raised his arms and voice in a chant calling for peace and understanding with the tribe's guardian spirits. Kaitiaki reacted by swimming parallel to the shore. Its movements were slow and deliberate in stark contrast to its previous aggression. The atmosphere changed from tension to tentative relief as dawn broke. Tama and the elders met at first light to discuss the implications of the events that occurred during the night. They agreed that they must take proactive steps to prevent similar tragedies and respect orcas in the future by closely monitoring fishing activities and educating younger generations about Kaitiaki. In the following weeks, the tribe began to change its relationship with the sea. The tribe changed their fishing routes to avoid orca tracks and stationed lookouts to monitor marine life in the area. Tama and a select few of his followers began to make regular offerings to Kaitiaki. This ritual ensured respect and coexistence. As the months passed, the tale of the night Kaitiaki received the tribe's apologies became an essential part of tribal legend. Tama became a respected tribal leader. He was revered for restoring peace and helping bridge the spiritual connection between tribes and orcas. Kaitiaki became a protector, not a feared ghost. The attack stopped. The tribe's bond with their sea guardian was strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. Kaitiaki, the ancient orca, once again guarded the waters and ensured the safety and abundance of the tribe that had learned to respond to their guardian's calls. The tribe's newfound harmony is a testament to their resilience and deep respect for nature. It was a warm summer evening in July 2012 at the Miami Seaquarium, one of Florida's most renowned marine life parks. The massive amphitheater was packed to capacity, buzzing with excited energy as families and tourists eagerly awaited the start of the park's iconic orca show. At the center of it all was Jackson Briggs, the charismatic head trainer who had been with the Seaquarium for over 15 years. A living legend in the industry, Jackson's effortless rapport with the park's orcas, or killer whales, made him a fan favorite and a frequent feature on marine documentaries. That night's performance held special significance. Jackson was set to unveil an all-new routine with Kayla, a massive 7,000-pound female orca recently captured off the coast of Iceland. Renowned for her erratic behavior and stubborn streak, Kayla had proven a challenge even for Jackson's well-honed skills. As the lights dimmed and the opening fanfare blared, Jackson strode into the spotlighted center ring, microphone in hand. His trademark megawatt grin was displayed as he whipped the crowd into a frenzy, exclaiming if they were ready for one whale of a show. The crowd erupted in raucous cheers and applause. After basking in their adulation for a few moments, Jackson continued that they were in for a treat by introducing an all-new routine featuring their recently acquired orca Kala. A hush fell over the audience when they mentioned the whale's name. Kayla's tremendous size and ferocious temperament were well known. The pool's surface suddenly erupted in an explosive cascade as if on cue. Kayla breached utterly, clearing the water by several feet before crashing back down thunderously, sending shockwaves rippling across the amphitheater. The audience sat awed in silence for a heartbeat, before erupting into rapturous applause and cheers. Jackson grinned, motioning for the crowd to settle down while remarking on Kayla's impressive entrance, saying it was just a taste of what the mammal could do. He then instructed the audience to make noise and revive Kayla for her debut. As the audience obliged with raucous hoots and hollers, the opening beats of a thumping musical track filled the amphitheater. Twin gates slid open, and Jennifer Ramirez and Marcus Coleman emerged riding watercraft. With a roar of their engines, the two staffers took off in tight, dizzying maneuvers across the pool's length. The crowd was whipped into a frenzy, whooping and cheering as they performed daring stunts through Kayla's deadly domain. When it seemed the duo would kick their routine into an even higher gear, a piercing screech split the air as ear-piercing acoustic feedback looped through the speaker system, corrupting the thumping music into an agonizing whine. Almost immediately, Kayla's behavior changed. The massive orca's unblinking eye rolled wildly as she thrashed in apparent agitation or pain. Her graceful motions became violent, choppily surging through the water and causing the jet skis to be buffered perilously. Jackson shouted, panicked orders to cut the music and shut everything off, his voice only adding to the cacophony. Jennifer looked to the trainer in confusion, but Marcus, a 5-year veteran, seemed to sense the danger and gunned his jet ski to put distance between himself and the increasingly enraged behemoth. In a whip-fast motion, Kayla turned and surged directly at Marcus. Her massive jaws unhinged, swallowing his craft nearly whole with one titanic snap. The crowd's cheers turned to shrieks of terror as they glimpsed Marcus being flung lifelessly, leaving a rapidly spreading stain. Jackson screamed into the mic, his face blanched of all showmanship as he told Jennifer to get out of there. But it was too late. Jennifer was struggling to restart her jet ski, its engine clogged and useless. When Kayla turned her sights on her, the young woman didn't have time to scream as the orca's massive jaws engulfed her whole. Her abandoned jet ski spun uselessly in the only remnant of its rider as unrest erupted in the amphitheater, the crowd scrambling in blind terror. Jackson froze on his pedestal, a look of terror on his face, as Kayla turned her dead-eyed stare towards him. Twin lines of bloody foam dripped from her macabre jaws as she issued a low, rumbling trumpet, as if saying he was following. A primal shiver of terror lanced up Jackson's spine. He spun and ran from the pedestal as fast as he could, making a beeline for the emergency bulkhead as panels slid open and crews rushed to deploy safety netting and rescue teams. But Kayla was having none of it. With a surprisingly deft flick of her flukes, she sent a powerful shockwave rippling across the surface, sweeping personnel off their feet as jets of water fueled by her mass and power lanced into their midst. Jackson reached the bulkhead, fumbling with shaking hands for the emergency lever as the tsunami-like swell battered the gate behind him. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw Kayla surging towards him with blind, remorseless hunger. The safety bulkhead groaned open with agonizing slowness to reveal the drained emergency tank. But Jackson had no chance to react before Kayla's mass slammed into him, sending him flying through the air to strike the tank's surface with bone-crushing force before plunging into its shallow waters, surrounded by a halo of darkness. When Jackson's vision finally cleared, he glimpsed the looming horror of Kayla's mass descending upon him in the enclosed tank, as emergency crews and civilians alike looked on helplessly. Trapped, broken, and slowly drowning beneath Kayla's bulk, Jackson awaited the inevitable with surprising calm, his final thoughts regretting the hubris of thinking these mighty beasts could ever bend to humanity's will. In the aftermath, footage ricocheted around the internet and news, providing a harsh rebuke and reminder of the risks in blurring entertainment with dominion over intelligent beings that can never be truly tamed. The seaquarium fought to remain open and restore its reputation. Still, a cultural tide against the captivity of orcas had begun to surge, making the events a symbol for the cause. Within 2 years, the iconic park shuttered, and its orcas retired to sanctuaries where such deadly showmanship could never occur again. Only Kayla remained in captivity. Her final fate was a grim shadow of the lucrative entertainment spectacles she resisted. For some, wild spirits must forever remain unbroken no matter the cost. The Ocean Explorer, a research vessel, glided across the calm waters of Monterey Bay in California. Its mission was to map the underwater mountains using advanced sonar technologies. On board the ship was a dedicated team of scientists, including marine scientist Dr. Laura Evans and geoscientist Dr. Mark Thompson. A gentle breeze was stirring the surface of a bright blue sea. The ocean explorer had cutting-edge technology to reach the deepest recesses of oceans and reveal secrets that have been hidden for millennia. The data began to flow in as the sonar sent out its regular pings. This created a picture of an underwater landscape on the monitors inside the ship's laboratory. Laura and Mark analyzed the images to find promising geological formations. Unknown to the crew, their sonar waves reached much deeper than the mountains intended to be mapped. The sound waves in the abyssal deeps disturbed an enormous deep-sea orca, known as the abyssal phantasm, to those who have seen it. The orca was well adapted to the ocean's dark, crushing depths and its environment's immense pressures. It interpreted the unfamiliar sonar pings as a potential threat, prompting a defensive response. Roused from its hiding place, the massive creature began a swift and determined ascent toward the surface, its movements reflecting urgency and intent. The team was satisfied with their day's work, feeling a sense of accomplishment. However, this tranquility was abruptly shattered when the vessel began to shake violently. An unknown force had collided with its hull, jolting everyone on board. As a large, ominous shadow appeared on the sonar screen, the screens flickered, heightening the tension and uncertainty among the crew. Laura grabbed a table for support. Mark ran to the window and peered out at the water. The outline of the orca was visible, with its black and whitish pattern against the deep blue sea. Perceiving the vessel as an intruder in its territory, the orca initiated a series of aggressive maneuvers. It rammed the ship again, this time with even greater force, resulting in a visible dent in its hull. This assertive behavior underscored the orca's territorial instincts and capacity to defend its domain. On the bridge, chaos broke out. James Reed, the captain, yelled orders at his crew, telling them to stabilize the ship and assess the damages. Given her knowledge of orcas and their behavior, Laura understood that the creature mistook their sonar as a challenge. She told her captain that she needed to turn off the sonar immediately. This could be irritating the orca. Captain Reed shut off the sonar without hesitation. The ship was silent. Only the creaking metal and the waves lapping against the hull were audible. It appeared briefly that the orca was retreating as the shadow disappeared from the sonar display. The crew breathed a sigh of relief as they hoped the orca had calmed down. Their relief, however, was not long-lasting. Abyssal Phantasm, curious and still in a rage, smashed into the ship with a huge splash. The impact sent an ocean wave which sprayed cold seawater on the Ocean Explorer's deck. Laura and Mark looked at each other with deep concern. The orca's movements blinded them without the sonar. They relied only on their few visual sightings in the vast ocean surrounding them. As the sun set in Monterey Bay, the Ocean Explorer crew found themselves in an uneasy dance with one of the ocean's greatest predators. The crew of the Ocean Explorer's exploration mission had become a desperate battle for survival as they attempted to avoid angering the orca. The Abyssal Phantasm, however, wasn't ready to let the intruders go so quickly. Laura stood on deck and scanned the darkness illuminated by only the dim running lights of the ship. Orcas were now a ghostly sight, only seen occasionally when they surfaced and blew mist from their blowholes into the cold, icy air. Captain Reed spoke to his crew in a low voice while firmly holding the wheel, instructing them to keep the engines low. He was intent on not provoking the situation further. Dr. Mark Thompson and the rest of the science team gathered in the laboratory below deck, where maps were spread out on the table. They were searching for underwater features that might discourage the orca's pursuit. Mark pointed to an inlet near the coast on the map and suggested that the orca might back off if they moved closer to the shallower areas. It was decided to change course. As the ship moved slowly towards shallower water, tension was palpable. As they waited for the orca to follow, every minute felt like an eternity. Laura, who was keeping watch, pointed suddenly towards the stern. The orca appeared again, but its behavior was different. It did not charge, but swam parallel to the ship. The large eye was visible above the surface of the water. Orcas are a constant reminder that the deep sea is unpredictable and wild. They should not be taken lightly. As the ship moved to shallower water, encounters with abyssal phantasm became less frequent. The depth of water may be something it wanted to avoid crossing. The silhouette of the coastline became visible with the dawn's first light. The crew was exhausted but vigilant as they prepared to dock. The Orca had been missing for a while, so it was hoped it had finally decided to retreat into deeper waters. As the ship docked, it was then that the events of the previous night began to sink into the crew. The Orca's mighty presence was evident on the hull. Captain Reed and the crew briefed local authorities and started discussions about the implications of the experience for future research. Laura and Mark shared their story with other marine scientists and presented their collected data. Understanding the abyssal phantasm's behavior was essential to manage future encounters safely. It was a big deal in the community, and there were plans to thoroughly study the area while respecting the boundaries set by the wildlife. The Ocean Explorer experience reminded those aboard of the delicate balance between the human desire to know and the sacredness of nature. The ocean is not a mere subject for study, but a living, breathing entity that deserves respect and consideration. They had learned a valuable lesson from the mysterious abyssal phantasm, a mysterious protector of the deep. As they left, memories of those hours of tension at sea, a story of human endeavor and the untamed spirit of the ocean, lingered. It was the summer of 2016 when a team of marine biologists from the University of Cambridge ventured into the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, just off the rugged coast of Svalbard, Norway. Their mission was to conduct an ecological survey on the region's unique marine life, studying orcas' behavior and migration patterns, also known as killer whales. The research team was led by the experienced Dr. Elizabeth Finley, a seasoned marine biologist with over 2 decades of fieldwork. The team included Dr. Finley's research and 3 field technicians, Julia Harding, Diego Ramirez, and Liam O'Connor. As their sturdy research vessel, the RV Nautilus, powered through the chilly Arctic waves, the team eagerly prepared their equipment to immerse themselves in the raw, unforgiving beauty of the Arctic wilderness. Little did they know that this routine expedition was about to take a terrifying turn that would test the limits of their survival instincts and forever change their perception of the creatures they studied. The first few days went smoothly, with the team documenting marine species and collecting data. However, as they navigated through dense ice floes on the 4th day, an eerie silence fell upon the icy expanse. Elizabeth noticed that the hydrophones were not picking up any whale vocalizations and remarked with concern that it was as if they had all gone silent. Elizabeth frowned, scanning the frozen landscape uneasily. She thought that it was odd since orcas were highly vocal creatures, especially during their hunting periods. Suddenly, a distant splashing caught their attention. Julia gasped while peering through her binoculars and told Dr. Finley she might want to look at something. Elizabeth swiftly grabbed the binoculars, and what she saw made her blood run cold. A massive orca over 30 feet long was violently thrashing in the water, its powerful tail thunderously slapping the surface. Elizabeth breathed tremblingly. She murmured that she had never seen an orca that size before. The colossal creature continued its frenzied display, its cavernous maw gaping open to reveal razor-sharp teeth. Suddenly it turned its massive head towards their vessel, locking its cold, soulless gaze upon them. Elizabeth shouted at them to be cautious, but it was too late. With incredible speed and agility defying its size, the orca propelled itself at the RV Nautilus, crashing into the hull with freight train force. The violent impact sent a shockwave through the vessel, knocking the team down and sending equipment flying. Diego cried out in terror, asking what in God's name that was. Elizabeth struggled to her feet, her heart pounding. She told them tremblingly that the orca had just rammed them and ordered everyone to grab a life vest and prepare to abandon the ship. A loud groan echoed through the hull as if on cue, and the RV Nautilus began violently listing to one side. Without wasting another second, the team scrambled towards the life rafts, their training kicking in. They leaped into the icy waters one by one, clinging to the bright orange rafts as the RV Nautilus slowly slipped beneath the waves to its final resting place among the ice floes. Elizabeth called out to check if everyone was accounted for as she scanned the bobbing rafts. A chorus of affirmations answered her. But as she counted faces, her heart sank. Liam was missing. She repeatedly shouted Liam's name, asking where he was across the expanse. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. They turned to see Liam thrashing in the water, his face twisted in agony as the massive orca clamped its jaws down on his leg, slowly dragging him under. Julia screamed rawly in horror. The team could only watch helplessly as the orca toyed with its prey, its bulk disappearing and reappearing in the crimson-tinged waters. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the thrashing stopped and the Arctic fell silent again, save for gentle waves lapping the ice. Tears streamed down Julia's face as she clutched her life vest, her body racked with sobs. She asked in a trembling voice why the orca did that. Elizabeth could only shake her head, eyes haunted. She whispered hoarsely that she didn't know, but they needed to get to safety before the creature returned. With heavy hearts, the team paddled towards the nearest ice floe, hauling themselves onto the frozen surface. Exhaustion and shock set in as they huddled together, seeking warmth in each other's embrace. Hours passed as the Arctic sun dipped, casting long shadows across the ice. Suddenly, a distant splashing echoed through the silence, and Elizabeth's head snapped up, her eyes widening in horror. She breathed inaudibly, shouting that the orca was back. Sure enough, the massive orca cut through the water towards them, its sleek dark form effortlessly powerful. But this time its movements seemed calculated, almost predatory. Elizabeth whispered to them to stay still and not make a sound, her heart pounding. The team froze, breath shallow and rapid, as the orca drew nearer and nearer, dwarfing their tiny forms. Just when they thought it would pass them by, the orca suddenly changed course, heading straight for their fragile refuge. Its immense body slammed into the ice floe with a sickening crack, sending massive shards flying everywhere. Elizabeth shouted through the chaos for them to run and get to higher ground. The team scrambled across the rapidly disintegrating ice, feet slipping and sliding as they desperately sought purchase. But as they neared a larger, stable floe, the orca struck again, its massive tail sweeping across the ice and sending Diego tumbling into the freezing waters. Before anyone could react, the orca was upon Diego, its cavernous maw stretching open to deliver the final, lethal strike. In a split second, Elizabeth grabbed a nearby ice pick and hurled it with all her might. The sharp tool whistled through the air, striking the orca squarely in the eye. The creature let out a loud bellow of pain, its massive body thrashing violently and spraying icy shards everywhere. Elizabeth screamed for them to run, her voice barely audible over the orca's agonized cries. Without hesitation, the team scrambled across the ice, hearts pounding as they distanced themselves from the enraged Leviathan. Finally, after the frantic flight, they reached a large, stable ice floe, hauling themselves onto its frozen surface and collapsing in exhausted heaps. Elizabeth panted, sweeping her eyes over the battered, bruised faces and asking if everyone was okay. Nods and murmurs answered her, but relief was short-lived. A distant splashing echoed, and they turned to see the orca, the eye now swollen and bleeding, slowly making its way toward them once more. Julia whispered tremblingly that it was not giving up. Elizabeth's heart sank, watching the relentless creature draw nearer as the harsh Arctic sapped its strength. Elizabeth watched in horror as the massive orca turned its sights on Julia next. The young woman scrambled across the ice, screaming in terror, but her desperate movements only seemed to spur on the predator. With a powerful thrust of its tail, the orca launched itself from the water, its upper body clearing the ice floe entirely. Julia tried to veer away but slipped, falling hard. The orca was upon her in that split second, cavernous jaws unhinged and gaping wide. It was over in seconds, Julia's lifeless form going limp as the dark waters rapidly stained crimson. Elizabeth could only watch in shocked stillness as the horror that happened in less than 5 minutes unfolded before her, unable to process the savage brutality she had just witnessed. The orca resurfaced, seeming to fix its cold, implacable stare directly on Elizabeth. It opened its bloodied jaws, issuing a low, reverberating bellow, like a chilling warning from the depths. To her horror, Elizabeth found the monster was slowly bearing down on her position, cutting through the waves with terrifying ease. Her breath came in panicked gasps, limbs trembling, unable to run or even move from sheer primal fear. Just as the orca was nearly upon her, Smashing through the ice mere yards away, a deafening thundercrack split the air overhead. A helicopter emblazoned with a Norwegian research station logo zinged into view, downdraft swirling clouds of blinding snow. The Orca immediately abandoned its pursuit, slipping beneath the reddened surface and vanishing from sight. Fighting panic, Elizabeth held up her arms to signal as the chopper hovered above, the winch line dropping to haul her aboard. In the following weeks, Elizabeth's dreams were plagued by visions of orcas, always pursuing, always striking without warning, with cold, intelligent eyes observing dispassionately as they claimed their victims. As soul-withering as her experience had been, it was evident that the implacable Orca's throwdown challenge had irrevocably altered her. The old Elizabeth was gone forever, reborn as something far harder and more unyielding, a new creature forged in Arctic cruelty. Aquapolis is a futuristic underwater colony nestled in the Caribbean Sea. It was a place of scientific advancement and advanced aquatic engineering. Scientists, engineers, and families lived in harmony with the ocean in this colony, a marvel of technology. Aquapolis hosted a highly secretive military research facility where top scientists were engaged in developing genetic modifications for marine animals aimed at enhancing their defense capabilities. One of their primary subjects, an orca referred to as Subject Delta within the project, was notably unique. This particular orca had undergone enhancements that significantly boosted its intelligence to levels comparable to humans. It had been trained to perform complex tasks and strategic operations, setting it apart from other marine creatures in their studies. Despite extensive security measures, the containment facility at Aquapolis had vulnerabilities. Subject Delta, the orca with enhanced intelligence and growing awareness of its confinement, identified a weak point in its enclosure. With a powerful strike of its tail, it shattered the barrier, causing the facility to flood with seawater. This breach allowed Subject Delta to escape into the open sea. The breach at Aquapolis triggered immediate chaos throughout the colony. Alarms blared, transforming the once peaceful habitat into a zone of panic. The security team, led by Commander Sarah Jennings, sprang into action. Amidst the turmoil, they worked diligently to assess the situation, coordinating efforts to contain the breach and mitigate any further risks to the colony and its inhabitants. As Subject Delta swam among the structures of Aquapolis, it began launching attacks on the colony's infrastructure. The striking black and white form of Subject Delta stood out against the backdrop of bioluminescent plants that adorned the underwater colony. Its first deliberate target was a critical power supply unit near the residential area. By ramming into it, Subject Delta caused blackouts across various sections of the colony, disrupting the normalcy and safety of the habitat. Life support systems started to fail without power, and residents found themselves in desperate situations. Residents were directed to safe zones, and emergency protocols were implemented. Dr. Emily Stanton, one of the foremost marine biologists opposed to militarizing marine life, realized the severity of the threat. The security officers, equipped with submersible vehicles and specialized equipment, tried to intercept the orca. Subject Delta used aggressive tactics to avoid capture. It darted through the colony's buildings, taking advantage of the complexity. The residents of Aquapolis watched as the chase went on, their homes becoming a battlefield. The tension in the colony was palpable. Every crash and thud echoing through its corridors reminded the residents of the danger outside. Recognizing the need for a new strategy, Commander Jennings coordinated efforts from the control center. Understanding that Subject Delta was intelligent and familiar with their tactics, she knew they needed a more thoughtful approach rather than merely trying to outmaneuver it. In the meantime, Dr. Stanton and other scientists gathered to discuss the possible causes behind Subject Delta's behavior, noting that it was not only attempting to escape, but also acting out in opposition to their actions, with its instincts distorted by their experiments. The Caribbean Sea's inky blackness became a spooky backdrop to the drama unfolding as night fell around Aquapolis. Sarah Jennings, the commander of the command center, formulated a plan requiring precision and courage. She informed her team that they should lead the creature into open water and away from the colony. She explained that they could use a sedative to calm the animal once there, but they needed to get it to come with them without causing more damage. The team used a series of low-frequency sound pulses coming from a submersible decoy to lure Subject Delta. These were similar to the sounds that initially agitated it. The submersible would be remotely operated to guide Subject Delta towards a trap area, where the water is deeper, and sedatives could be administered safely. Emily Stanton knew that despite her concerns about the ethics of the situation, this was their best chance to stop Subject Delta without causing it any harm. Her expertise in marine behavior was crucial to the mission's success. Subject Delta followed the sound of the first pulses from the decoy submarine cautiously but curiously. Residents gathered in safe zones around monitors and watched the unfolding of the operation with great anxiety. Each meter Subject Delta moved away from their homes was met with a collective sigh. As they waited for the outcome, the tension was palpable, a mix of fear and hope present. The trap was placed in deeper water. Following the decoy into the designated area, Subject Delta entered. The team deployed the sedative at the command of Commander Jennings. As the chemicals dispersed in the water, the giant orca began to calm down. It took several hours to sedate Subject Delta, but it was still alive. Dr. Stanton confirmed its stability by monitoring the orca's vital signs. She told the team that it was over, with a mixture of relief and sadness. Aquapolis's people reflected on the events in the aftermath. Slowly, the colony returned to normality. However, these events left a lasting impression on its collective consciousness. The breach was repaired in the containment unit, and new safety protocols were implemented to avoid future incidents. Commander Jennings, Dr. Stanton, and others reviewed the colony's practices to advocate for a more humane treatment of genetically modified marine animals. The incident with Subject Delta opened up a broader discussion on the ethical implications of using such creatures for military purposes. Subject Delta was moved to a facility, allowing it to live in peace without danger to humans. Its story became a case study in marine biology programs worldwide. The encounter with Subject Delta marked a turning point for the residents of Aquapolis. They had survived a deadly cat-and-mouse game, but their lessons would shape the future of this underwater utopia. Now more than ever, they knew their survival depended on their technology and ability to coexist peacefully in the ocean with its inhabitants. A change occurred beneath the surface of the calm waters of the Gulf of California. This disruption of harmony in the marine environment shocked the system. Orcas are majestic creatures that usually inhabit colder waters. However, they were far away from their habitat. The seafloor had been shifted by a massive earthquake, causing anomalies in temperature and water currents. This led the orcas astray on their migration. The first person to notice the confused pod was Dr. Mia Alvarez. She is a marine scientist visiting the area to study climate change's impact on aquatic life. Orcas are known for complex social structures and rely on specific migration routes. They were visibly distressed. They were not suited to the Gulf's warm waters, nor did they have the needed food. The community was already wary when the first incident occurred. Local fishermen encountered several orcas while returning from a late evening fishing trip. Without warning, the orcas surrounded their boat, sleek black and white bodies cutting through the water with alarming speed. One of the fishermen, Carlos, watched in horror as an orca rammed the side of their tiny vessel, tilting it dangerously. The fishermen managed to escape, but the event began a series of dangerous encounters that intensified their fear and anger toward these unfamiliar visitors. Orcas' condition grew worse as the days went by. They were used to eating fatty fish in colder waters, but found survival difficult in these unfamiliar waters. In their desperation, they began to act aggressively. This was a shocking change for an animal known for its intelligence and peaceful nature towards humans. Local fishermen started to report encounters. It became common to see boats returning from fishing trips with damaged nets or ripped ones. One particularly distressing morning, a small fishing boat capsized. Other fishermen barely saved its 2 crew members. The entire community was on edge. Not only were their livelihoods at risk, but also their lives. Dr. Alvarez decided to act after realizing the urgent nature of the situation. Orcas are intelligent and can learn and adapt quickly. She planned to use acoustic signals to mimic orcas' original habitat sounds to guide them back to the natural migration route. She worked with local authorities and other scientists to install underwater speakers on boats. The boats would move slowly northward towards colder water and broadcast the sounds to try and lead the orcas out of the Gulf. Initial tests in controlled environments showed promising results, but doing it in open waters with a wild pod posed a different challenge. The community watched the operation with anticipation. The boats formed a sound corridor extending into the colder, deeper parts of the Pacific to redirect orcas. Dr. Alvarez monitored the orcas' responses from a leading boat and adjusted frequencies and sound patterns to attract their interest. The first day was a slow one. Orcas were curious about the boat sounds, but cautious of them. Dr. Alvarez's team spent the night refining the approach to show that it can influence orcas without resorting to more invasive techniques. The orcas started to follow the sound path more confidently by the second day. Dr. Alvarez closely observed their behavior, noting signs of comfort in the colder waters. The journey was slow and tense, but as each mile northward passed, hope grew for these majestic creatures to be saved. As the operation progressed, the pod adapted to the acoustic guidance. Yet each deviation from the course became a significant challenge, reflecting the unpredictable nature of the wild orcas' responses. As Dr. Mia Alvarez observed the pod of orcas adapting to the direction of the acoustic signal, she felt cautious optimism. As they moved further north, the waters cooled down and became more suitable for orcas. They were also closer to their diet. The marine biologist, her team, and the local fishing community continued pushing further into the Pacific. The journey was long. Orcas showed signs of adaptation but occasionally wandered, perhaps confused by other sounds or distracted by residual warmth currents. Each deviation was a challenge and tested the patience and determination of all involved. Dr. Alvarez fine-tuned the acoustic frequency to mimic orca communication in the wild. Meanwhile, back in the Gulf, the fishermen convened to discuss their experiences. Jose, a seasoned fisherman, expressed his initial resentment and growing understanding of the orca's plight, acknowledging that the creatures were as many victims of circumstance as they were. In the Gulf of California, the locals watched and waited. Orcas had temporarily left the waters so the fishermen could venture out in peace. The attacks were stopped and the damaged boats were being repaired. The actual test would be whether orcas would continue on their new course after the operation ended. After several days at sea, the pod started to display behaviors that indicated they were approaching their habitat. The pod became more active and more often surface breached. Dr. Alvarez viewed these behaviors as signs of positive ecological integration. She explained to her team that they were recognizing home. Her voice was a mixture of fatigue and relief. The plan's final phase began as the boats approached calmer waters containing orcas' natural food. Dr. Alvarez's team slowly reduced the volume of acoustic signals to wean the orcas from human guidance. The process was delicate, similar to taking off training wheels. Too abruptly, the orcas could lose their way, while too slowly they may become dependent on sound for guidance. As the sun began to set on what was hoped to be the final day of the operation, the orcas began to move away from the boats. They became aware of their newly found autonomy. The orcas swam quickly, diving profoundly and surfacing far away from the ships. It was bittersweet for Dr. Alvarez to see the creatures she had guided returning to their natural rhythm. The mission was successful, and the boats returned to the Gulf of California. Dr. Alvarez recorded the final observations and planned to share his findings and methods to prevent similar situations. Local fishermen welcomed the team back with gratitude. Their livelihoods were secure, and they had a renewed respect for their marine neighbors. Dr. Alvarez wrote her report in her temporary office detailing the journey and the emotional and scientific challenges they had overcome. The rescue saved the pod of orcas and strengthened the relationship between humans and animals in the vast ocean ecosystem. After the incident, the Gulf of California returned to its routine with a new alert system and enhanced monitoring procedures, which will help prevent future disruptions. With a heavy heart but a hopeful outlook, Dr. Alvarez left the area, bringing along the echo of the orca calls that had filled her days and nights in these turbulent waters. In 2001, the atmosphere in Ocean Majesty Marine Park was charged with palpable excitement, as if the entire town was pulsating with the thrum of an electric current. This year was marked by clear skies and sunny days, setting the perfect backdrop for the season's most awaited event. Today was no ordinary day at the park. It was the debut of Titan, a colossal orca recently transferred from another marine reserve specifically for this event. Titan's reputation preceded him. He was known for his impressive size, abilities, and unpredictable nature, which only heightened the anticipation and suspense surrounding his performance. This combination of factors promised an unforgettable show, drawing an eager crowd all set to witness Titan's majestic prowess in action. Parents and children were ready with cameras to capture the moment. The sun shone brightly and cast shimmering reflections in the pool. The day was perfect for a show. Sarah Jennings was a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the show backstage. She spent weeks with Titan to learn his quirks and gain his trust. She wore a bright blue wetsuit that matched her determination. The show started as the clock struck 3. Sarah entered the arena confidently, waving at the cheering audience. Titan jumped gracefully out of the water after she gave the signal. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah sat on Titan's back and they performed stunning dives. As the show neared its conclusion, the energy level changed. The cheers of the crowd grew louder and the clapping increased. Titan, a sensitive orca, began to become agitated. He ignored Sarah's orders. Sarah touched his snout lightly as a gesture of comfort between them. The noise continued to grow. The speakers blared music and children screamed with delight. Titan, overwhelmed by the situation, acted out. He grabbed Sarah's foot in his mouth during a routine dive. This was not done out of aggression, but rather confusion and fear. The audience gasped in confusion, not knowing if it was part of the performance. Sarah struggled with her release and she called out to the other trainers in her heartbeat. Titan dove, pulling her underwater swiftly. Sarah tried to stay calm underwater. She knew panicking would make the situation worse. She gently stroked Titan's head to reconnect with her gentle giant. Above them was a flurry of activity as her team desperately tried to solve the crisis. Sarah was under pressure underwater as she struggled to resist Titan's grip. Only her training as an orca trainer kept Sarah calm in this dangerous situation. She knew that sudden movements might trigger a hostile response from an already distressed orca. Above the water, the crowd was in a quiet silence. The excitement of earlier had been replaced with a cloud of worry. Parents covered their kids' eyes and whispers about worry spread throughout the stands. Staff at the marine park worked tirelessly to get Titan to let Sarah go. They offered him food and threw his favorite toys to get his attention. Submerged and out of oxygen, Sarah realized she had to conserve her energy and oxygen. She resisted the urge to fight and stayed as still as possible, trying to calm herself and the orca holding her. She was desperate for answers as her air was rapidly running out. The control room decided to dim the music and calm the crowd using the announcer. Titan's agitation began to decrease as the environment changed. Once frenzied with confusion, his eyes began to return to normal. Michael Andrews, the trainer in charge, appeared to be urgently directing the rescue operation. His voice was steady as he issued commands, and he carried the weight and urgency of the situation with determination, focused on saving his friend and colleague. The tension increased as the minutes passed. Sarah's lungs were screaming for air and Titan's grip began to loosen as Sarah's consciousness started to fade. It was almost tangible that his behavior had changed, as if suddenly he realized he wasn't in danger. With a last-ditch effort, the trainers diverted Titan long enough to allow Sarah to escape. The emergency response team was there to help her as she gasped for air. As the crowd watched her surface, they erupted in applause, relief, and cries. Sarah was taken to a medical station and the show abruptly ended. The park released statements to the media and the shocked audience explaining that the strange behavior was a reaction to the loud noises and promising to review their animal care protocol. Titan was then closely monitored and given extra training in the weeks following to help him better adapt to the stress of performing. Sarah took a short leave to reflect on her traumatic experience. She returned to the show with a renewed dedication to animal welfare and a desire to change how the shows are conducted to prevent incidents like this. Marine park staff learned an essential lesson about crowd control and animal behavior. They revised their guidelines to prioritize the comfort and safety of the animals and the humans who handle them. Titan performed under stricter conditions, and all staff were better informed about the signs of animal distress. The tragic event between Sarah and Titan forged a bond based on mutual respect and shared experience. It could have been much different. Ocean Majesty Marine Park staff and community will always remember the day that the line was drawn between safety and entertainment in the Orca pool.